Crossover Thursday here on this Thanksgiving. John Butchko, Locked On Jets, along with Rob Rang, Locked On Seahawks, getting ready for Sunday's game between the New York Jets and the Seattle Seahawks. These teams have a really interesting history. Lots of fairly memorable games these teams have played. I remember back in '97, Bill Parcells' first game as Jets head coach was a game in the Kingdom where the Jets, they were coming off a 1-15 season, and the Jets went up there and beat the Seahawks 41-3. The next year game, I won't mention for you guys know what happened in '98 with Vinny Testaverde at the Meadowlands.
Yep.
I think it was in December too, so we won't mention that. But 10 years later, 2008, Brett Favre goes to Seattle, a snowy day, and Mike Holmgren's last home game as Seahawks last game as Seahawks head coach. The Seahawks beat the Jets and contribute to the demise of the Favre Jets. Some really interesting games these teams have played through the years, Rob. Sunday, the 2024 version of Jets and Seahawks. What are the keys to victory for Seattle?
Well, first off, it's just I love that you mentioned those games. One of the very first games I remember attending as a fan, as a kid, was the game that you mentioned before. Bill Parcells, his first season, coming out for the 1-15 season. There was an awful lot of expectations in Seattle in that opener, and I remember bringing my best buddy Gino up there to the game with me, and watching the Seahawks get absolutely throttled, as you said, I think 41-3, and just that was about as big of a disappointment as I've ever seen in an opener. And so that was a fascinating game. And then I was fortunate at that point, a accredited member of the media, and was down on the field for Brett Favre's final game, and the snow coming down, and literally there were snowballs being thrown at Brett Favre, at the late Seattle owner Paul Allen, and batting snowballs away so that the athletes and the owner at that point were getting pelted with snowballs. I mean, there's just some memorable experiences. So I love that you just mentioned that. As far as Sunday's game, as I mentioned before, I really think that these are two teams that are so similar in so many different ways. It just feels like that one team is really starting to hit on all cylinders, and the other team is kind of flatline at this point. And so that is, I'm fascinated to see if the Jets coming off of their bye are able to regroup a little bit and get a little bit more timing between Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, or Garrett Wilson, wherever the case might be. The team that runs the ball effectively, I think, and I know that that's as cliche as it gets, but I think it's really true in this particular football game, because you are going against two pretty stout defenses, two somewhat enigmatic quarterbacks. And so I think that, again, the team that is able to run the ball a little bit more effectively, I think it's fascinating because Breece Hall was the only running back that was selected ahead of Kenneth Walker III a couple of years ago, and they both have shown their big play ability. Neither have had the numerical statistical success so far this season that I think people who drafted him in the first round of their fantasy football draft, for example, might have been expecting, or maybe second round. But the point is that I really do think that's going to be one of the biggest keys to this football game. Obviously, whoever controls the clock, whoever limits turnovers, but I think that the team that runs for the most yards in this game winds up winning the football game.
Rob, I think in many ways it's going to come down, and not so much who wins, but just whether this is competitive, is what Jets team shows up for this one. Because as you mentioned, they are coming off their bye, and the last couple of weeks, it's kind of felt like the Jets have come out really, really flat, and that's been one of the stories of the season. If they were like in the game late in the second quarter, they really started to focus and key in, and they, even though they lost to the Colts, they turned it into a game. Thursday Night Football, Halloween night against the Houston Texans, they played a really bad first half, but they were still in it. Quinnen Williams made some big plays to hold Houston down in that one, and they fought back and won. And then game a couple weeks ago against Arizona, the Jets just came out flat, and the Cardinals steamrolled them. The Cardinals scored touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and you just kind of saw the Jets lose their fight. And, I'm always like hesitant to question like effort when we're talking about professional athletes, but there were moments in that game against Arizona where you saw, it's not, I don't know if guys weren't trying, but you saw like a Jets defender trying to make a tackle, and the second and third guys are just kind of standing around instead of rallying to the football and going after them. It's just like little things like that you see. And this Jets team is now out of the playoff race. If you've been watching Jets games over the last month, you've always heard the announcer say, well, we spoke with Aaron Rodgers, and he thinks the schedule is softening up, and this is going to be the game that turns it around. And I think the illusion that the Jets were going to be able to turn it around finally ended 2 weeks ago against the Indianapolis Colts. At 3-8, I think there's really no coming back from this. So the question is, how much passion will we see the Jets play with? Will we see the team that fought to victory against Houston? Will we see the team that, didn't show a lot of fight against Arizona? I think that's the question. That's the question of whether it's going to be a close game. I don't think the Jets are going to blow the Seahawks out. I think that there are three possible outcomes in this game. I think that the Seahawks could blow the Jets out if the Jets don't take, if the Jets come out flat, or it could be a close game that goes either way. And part of it will be, how does the team respond to everything that's happened? Apparently, there was an owner-mandated practice during the bye week that the head coach was going to give them off, and the owner said, no, you're practicing. I don't know that that's going to have a good impact. I may have no impact. I don't know that it's going to have a good impact on morale, but it's kind of where we're at in this Jets season. It's
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say it's a season that began with Super Bowl hopes, but when those things fall apart, you never know how it's going to impact the team.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that feels like Seattle was basically experiencing that a couple of weeks ago. And then they had their bye week. They were able to get healthy. And that's one of the things that it feels like that this is a team that's getting even healthier. I mean, Uchenna Nwosu is not going to be back on the field in this particular game, but he in the past had been one of Seattle's best pass rushers, certainly its toughest, most physical run defender at the outside linebacker position. And he is expected to be coming back after this week or maybe 2 weeks from now, but still his injury opening was basically set up this past week. So I guess one of the questions I have is, to me, as we talked about, this feels like a team, that the Jets squad, that if they do play, if they focused, if they are ready to play, if they're not flat, that I need to think that this game could be close. To me, the Jets have some defensive playmakers. We talked a little bit about Quinton Williams. Obviously, his brother Quincy Williams is a terrific football player as well. I wanted to ask you about Will Montgomery and the possibility, Will McDowell, and the possibility of his pass rush ability. Seattle has some moving parts along the offensive line. Abraham Lucas is coming back from an injury, and then at the guard position specifically, Christian Haynes was drafted this year. He's a rookie, and then Satoa Leomea is a rookie as well. Those two players may be playing significant minutes. They're both in the idea, or both in the plans to be rotating at the right guard position. Quinton Williams doesn't usually line up against them. He's more often going up against the left guard, who would be another Jets former player, and Laken Tomlinson. So some of the struggles there. Do the Jets have enough firepower on defense, essentially, to be able to turn what could be a close game into one where the Jets are able to kind of steal a victory, as they did against the Houston Texans?
Yeah, in that game, Quinton Williams played a huge role. I mean, Texas had some chance to blow that game open in the first half, and every time Quinton Williams made a big play, he had a strip sack on C.J. Stroud, a couple other big tackles for loss, and Will McDonald was the first round pick a year ago. Having a big season statistically, I think if you've been watching the games, he hasn't been quite as good as the numbers would suggest. A number of his sacks have come on plays where he was unblocked, but it's developed a really nice spin move. He's not much of a run defender at this point, really struggles to hold up. Doesn't really set the edge all that well, but can get to the quarterback. And, this defensive line, if it performs up to standards, can keep the Jets in the game. I've kind of given up hope on Hassan Reddick, but that's another story. But Quinton Williams and Will McDonald, they're a nice 1-2 punch when we talk about the pass rush.